We'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Gangster Chronicles podcast. Unfortunately, my guy MC8 is out this week. He's sick right now. And I told him to keep his ass at home. But he'll be back with us next week. But I do have a very special guest with us tonight. One of the most authentic journalists around, when, in regards to hip hop, I would say, and he's a white guy.
I am.
Very obviously.
Guilty as charged.
He's a published author. He actually published a very good book called The History of Gangster Rap, from Schoolie D to Kendrick Lamar, The Rise of a Great American Art Form. Published Gucci Mane's self-help book, Guide to Greatness. But where I recognize him from, I guess we formed our relationship at was when he was writing for the Source magazine. He was the main editor. Also written for the New York Times, LA Times, XXL, the Chicago Tribune. This guy's like a real live hip hop journalist. He's at the source when it comes to the art form of hip hop. My man, Soren Baker. That was a long introduction, man.
Thank you, Steele. Appreciate that.
Long ass introduction, bro. Long ass introduction.
Thank you.
So, me, you, and Eiht have kind of been talking over the last few weeks about getting this list together, commemorating 50 years of hip hop. 50 years is a long time. I remember when this shit wasn't even around, man.
Yeah. Well, by the time I found out about it, it was around, but it wasn't nearly what it is today. So it felt like it wasn't around that much.
No, for sure, man. I've definitely had the pleasure of seeing this thing go from an underground phenomenon to just like now it's like a part of the culture. It is a part of the, it is culture.
It is.
It's culture itself.
Absolutely. It stands on its own.
And I would say, man, I definitely would say I'm one of those guys that's hip-hop is my culture. I live the lifestyle.
Yeah, me
because
too.
It's not you as well.
Me too.
We're living a lifestyle. So we're putting together a list, the greatest 50 rap albums, gangster rap albums of all time. And when I tell you that it's kind of hard to be objective doing something like this, because you have some albums that just kind of hit you in the heart.
Right.
And you're like, damn, man, I really can't put that on there, though, because it's not better than this.
That's the challenge with making lists, man, which is why I'm glad we got the three of us talking about it, because, for me, one of the hardest things that I ever did was reviewing albums, because when I would review them, especially in the LA Times and some of the magazines I wrote for, you got to, really look at it as a standalone thing. You can't look at it compared to other albums or what's going on. You just got to look at it for what it is, as its own entity. And judging that in real time and then not being able to really sit with it is also hard to do. But that's something I did hundreds of times. And I miss doing album reviews, but on the other hand, it is what it is. It's a different era now. So
yeah, it is. People are much more sensitive.
That's an understatement.
They're very sensitive nowadays. Before we get into this, have you ever had someone mad at you?
All the time. I used to have that on a regular basis.
Especially with the Source, because those stars were a big deal.
Well, the thing with the Source, this didn't really happen often. It only happened literally less than a handful of times with a newspaper. But in a magazine, man, there were several times where I always reviewed the album more favorably, and then the editor or however they did it would lower the mics, or, lower stars in different publications or whatever it was. And then the publicist or the artist would be looking at me sideways. Sometimes I just have to tell them, they kept the words, but they changed the rating. Or sometimes they would change some of the words. And it's that was bad for me, because as somebody that cares so much about what I do as a writer, I didn't want to give an album, say, 4 mics, and then it turns up as a 3.5, where they added a paragraph or two dissonant, or I gave it a 3.5 and now it's a 3, and they cut out half the good stuff I said. Because I think one thing people really get confused is 3 out of 5 is above average.
Yeah, it is.
It's a good rating, 3 out of 5. But because of a lot of different factors, people looked at a 3 like that was whack or something, and it's not. It's above average in its quality, which is why for me, I always preferred it the way I did it in the LA Times, which was out of 4. So that was like poor was 1 star, fair was 2 stars, 3 was good, and 4 was excellent. That to me is better because it's much more like there's less wiggle room, and we could only do half a star. So if it was between fair and good, you could give it a 2.5, but even that, like that's average.
Yeah,
So,
people get mad, people get upset in hip hop for being average because hip hop is one of the genres to where it's so competitive.
yeah.
If you're second place, you still pissed off. Like I'm pretty sure, especially with your background, like I said, you're very respected. You know what I'm saying? You really are a part of the culture. So you're not a guy just sitting up here imitating. I could see someone being mad or being in the bottom 50, but like when you spoke earlier, just to make this list at all.
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember, there's hundreds of gangster rap albums that have been released, if not thousands.
I would say
So-
by now, man, probably close to thousands.
Yeah, I mean, and I have almost all of them. So the fact that getting on a top 50 list, and some artists, I'm sure, for you, me, and Eiht are going to have more than one, that just shows you we're dealing with the cream of the cream of the cream of the crop.
Exactly.
And it's hard to do. You know, I know we have some similarities, I'm sure, but I know there's going to be some differences, and that's what's going to make it exciting to discuss.
Well, that's part of the debate, you know, and it makes for good barbershop talk all across the country.
Yes.
Really all across the world, probably. You know, guys, you know, people take rap very serious. I've seen people get into fights, like not, you know, big, you know, smackdown, drag out fist fights, but I've seen the people get in real intense arguments, man, over hip hop.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in some of those too, and it's just because we all love it so much, and it means a lot.
Yeah,
Like, you know, I
it
fell in
definitely-
love with it when I was 10, and I'm still in love with it.
It definitely incites, man, passion inside of people. So I guess since you're the guest this week, and by the way, Soren will be with us, I would say probably for the next 6 weeks. You know, we're talking about the 50 greatest gangster rap albums of all time. It's a task.
Hey, man.
And
Looking
it's very
forward-
tedious, you know,
looking
because,
forward to it.
you know, for me to get to this final, you know, number right here, I had to go through a lot of changes, man. I would go like I went and took a shower and I was thinking in my head, I said, no, man, I like that album, but I can't keep this off of there. And I went and changed it again, man. So this has been changed, like, for me, man, a good, because I had a head start of you guys.
Right.
I had a head start over you guys. So I think I did this, man, probably over maybe 15, 20 times, easy.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't take that long, but it definitely some reorganizing. And then, you know, one of the things that I found that was the most difficult is like if an artist is quote unquote viewed as gangster, but they're also players or pimps or street or hustler or whatever, then I was like, well, this album isn't super gangster. So even though it's one of my favorite albums or a phenomenal album, I had to take it off this list because it's more player or it's more drug dealing or it's more whatever. If it's not, you know, super gangstered out, then I was like, well, let me not include it.
I feel you, man. One of the things I kind of struggle with, it's kind of like the same thing because what I had to do is really look at what gangster rap is in its essence, right? It's talking about criminal behavior, street shit.
Right.
So my thing was this, I said, okay, to be fair and objective, if you're talking about selling dope, if you're talking about pimping some women, that's gangster shit.
That's true.
It's a criminal element, right? Even though the culture didn't give that title to the genre. You know, in its essence, what it truly is reality rap.
Street reporting.
You know,
I talk about that in my book, The History of
Yeah,
Gangster
exactly.
Rap.
The history of gangster rap. Yep. So that's what it is. Just a bunch of brothers talking about what they've surveyed in their life and in their neighborhoods. I know that's been a big debate in hip hop for the longest. Well, this dude ain't really no gangster, man. You know, he a nerd. He this and that. No, they don't have to be a gangster, man. These guys are just as creative. You got to give them the same creative license that you give Quentin Tarantino, Steven Spielberg, and other great writer or visualizer.
Yeah.
Just creative people.
I mean, to that point, that's what I wanted to do and illustrate with the History of Gangster Rap book that I have, which is really show like these dudes are geniuses as far as storytelling, as far as lyricism, as far as creating these atmosphere, these musical moments, this brilliant material that we all know and love, and that, you know, if you look at the titans of gangster rap, the four pillars of it with Ice-T, Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, and Snoop Dogg, they're also four of the biggest people in all of entertainment.
Exactly.
So when you look at it from that perspective, not only is all four of their music transcended rap, but as people, as businessmen and as entertainers, they've also transcended rap, and it all comes from gangster rap. And they all four are still doing it at a high level in their respective fields. And I think that just shows the power of gangster rap.
Gangster Chronicles, we gon' tell you how it goes. If I lie, my nose will grow like Pinocchio. We gon' tell you the truth and nothing but the truth. Gangster Chronicles, this is not your average show.